astronomical happens, or something like LBJ's rise to power, you know, uh, kind of goes through some bodies and some scandals. There's got to be somebody there that helps him get through that process without being scathed for some reason.
Oh, yeah. Well, here's another thing, too. You know, J. Edgar Hoover was getting long in the tooth then, and Kennedy was going to have him retired. He was well beyond the required retirement rate that he had personally set for his agents. And Kennedy was gonna dump Hoover. And Lyndon Johnson said, you know, I get to be president, you'll be head of the FBI for the rest of your life. You know? So
Oh, there you go. So there's some motivation there, obviously, on Hoover's side of the fence. Now, here's something that I think you would be really good to explain in why the heck did John F. Kennedy actually pick Lyndon Baines Johnson to be a running mate to begin with?
He didn't. Johnson was forced upon him by powers that be, including Johnson himself. Kennedy had picked a different guy whose name escapes me at this moment, but he even had his acceptance speech ready to go. But Johnson wanted on that ticket, and so he did some digging and found out that Kennedy had not only been cheating on his wife, but that he had Addison's disease. He got a hold of his medical records. And he was going to spill the beans if Kennedy didn't put him on that ticket. And apparently Bobby had close to a nervous breakdown, and they went into a hotel room, and the two of them talked about it and came out, and they said, okay, we're going to add Johnson to the ticket. And that's how Johnson was put there.
Oh, isn't that fascinating? So Johnson, true to form, was pulling strings and using information potentially that he got from Hoover himself, you know, regarding the things that Kennedy was involved with, to use it to climb to the top even farther as the vice presidential candidate. And by the way, go ahead.
One person asked Johnson, and he said, you know, why'd you want to run with Kennedy? And he said, well, you know, one out of 4 presidents dies and leaves the vice president to be the president, or something to that effect. And he says, I'm a gambling man type of thing. Yeah.
Oh, my word.
I mean, what a thing to say.
Yeah, and that would have been true to form in his modus operandi anyway, you know, to get to the top.
Yeah, I am paraphrasing because I can't remember the actual quote, but that is what, in a nutshell, that he did say.
Yes. And, of course, the actual presidential race against former Vice President Nixon was so very close to begin with. It's very possible. It's very possible that, well, let me ask you this. In your opinion, since they knew it was going to be a close election, do you think it would have been close because LBJ was involved, or do you think the other candidate would have been a better choice for him as far as the actual presidential race? Or do you think it would be LBJ, the guy that got him, you know, basically to a position where he could have won?
You know what? I couldn't give you an answer on that because that is a very politically charged thing. I'm not a political student. I tend to look at slightly different things. But America was a lot more conservative then. Kennedy was considered to be a young, not so experienced, hardcore Irish Catholic, and people were a little worried that his Catholicism would interfere with his, you know, running the government. And I think that made it a little scary. Now, Richard Nixon had been a fairly popular vice president. Richard Nixon was a guy who was very intelligent. And everyone who heard the radio show broadcast of that famous last discussion they had thought Nixon had won. But everyone who saw the television show thought Nixon had lost because he wasn't looking good.
Well, I remember that, Brian. I remember the idea that Nixon seemed almost unshaven, or at least his beard was much darker. He didn't have the makeup on that
Yeah.
almost the Hollywood-esque Kennedy looked like. He was so young and debonair, deep tan, and I think that you're right. The television audience just really fell for Kennedy at that point over Nixon. But you're right. As
Nixon
far as
was very sweaty, and he looked like he was sick or something, and that was the determining factor too. Here's a guy with sweat all over his face. Kennedy's looking, like he just stepped out of a salon, and people, people do what people do. They look at that and they pick favorites immediately.
Yeah. Okay, well, this is great. We have, a little bit over an hour now to kind of wrap up both of your kind of speeches, your research on this matter. So let's now get into the details of the other cast of characters that you have researched on.
Sure. The first one that I really put some time into was Clint Murchison. Clint Murchison was a Texas oil tycoon. And he had ties to mafia people. And the night before Kennedy was killed, he had a big party at his ranch. He had like a little mini ranch right there inside the Dallas city limits. And the night before, he had a party at that ranch, and this is where all these people show up, ostensibly to, I think, give the final answer on this thing. And when Lyndon Johnson gets out of this party very late at night, he arrived late. Most people didn't expect to see him there. He told his girlfriend, Madeline Brown, who he had a kid with, who also attended that meeting, come tomorrow, those blankety-blank Kennedy brothers are never going to embarrass me again. That's not a threat. That's a promise.
Oh, my word. So this is something that was this the party you're saying in Dallas, Texas, the night before Kennedy was shot?
The night before.
All right.
Yep.
And
also,
of course,
Murchison also had a racetrack. He was also the owner of the Dallas Cowboys at the time, for all you football fans out there. He had a racetrack called the Del Mar Racetrack, where J. Edgar Hoover and his allegedly gay boyfriend, Clyde Tolson, used to frequent quite often. And he also had a hotel in Southern California frequented by J. Edgar Hoover and Clyde Tolson. And by the way, those two vacationed there every year for 10 years in a row, and they never paid a single penny in bills. Also, other regular attendees of this hotel were people like Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon, and some other Texas oil tycoons, and many high-level mafia members, such as Johnny Rosselli, Sam Momo Giancana, Carlos Marcello, people like this.
Okay.
By the way, J. Edgar Hoover had said that the mafia, one time told the American public that the mafia didn't even exist, which, by the way, the mafia agreed with him.
Yeah, I'll bet.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a bunch of Texas billionaires and oil magnates that are part of the cast of characters. Who do we have next?
Next, probably Malcolm Wallace, who was Lyndon Johnson's personal hitman. He was a Texas native. He was a lantern-jawed tough guy. He was an ex-Marine. He was highly intelligent. He had went to the University of Texas, where he later even taught a class. And but it turns out, looks like he went to Columbia, because there's a very famous picture of a Skull and Bones meeting, and this is Skull and Bones is a semi-secret society on the Yale campus, and it's got a picture of Malcolm Wallace there, and standing right next to him is George Bush Sr.
Oh my goodness! And this is a class of Skull and Bones. Would it have been like they're all in the same class, or were they just like members from different years?
I think they're all in the same group of a few years, because they pick they pick new people to be members every year, and I think it's 13 or 20 or so. I don't know exactly how many, but it's a specific number, and then those are the new members, because the other ones are going to be graduating and leaving. So, yeah.
Right. So I think that's significant later on that we will also bring in the tie of the Bushes in this whole thing as well. But you're saying that Mac Wallace had some kind of a relationship then with Bush Sr. at that point.
Absolutely. He's in the same club with him, taking his picture. By the way, also sitting right next to him is William F. Buckley.
William F. Buckley. Can you imagine the arch?
The head.
Yeah.
Yes. Arch conservative, head of, what was the name of that publication he had? National Review?
The National Review. You're right. Isn't that fascinating?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a Skull and Bones guy, too. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Keep going. This is getting fascinating.
Malcolm Wallace, according to certain people, killed somewhere between 10 and 17 people for Lyndon Johnson. He either killed him himself or he was in charge of having them killed. This is according to Billy Solestes, although people doubt him because he tended to stretch the truth a little bit. But on this subject, there seems to be evidence of this.
Wow.
Malcolm Wallace was also gunned down a guy who was having an affair with his estranged wife at the time. He shot him in broad daylight. Also, that same guy was having an affair with Lyndon Johnson's sister, Josepha.
Oh, my goodness.
And this particular guy, he was a golf pro. And Wallace shot him right there in broad daylight. He gets caught, and he goes through a trial. Lyndon Johnson, by the way, is sitting in a hotel room just down the street from the courthouse during the trial, by the way. And Malcolm Wallace is convicted, but he only does 5 years suspended sentence for a murder conviction in the state of Texas. Yeah.
Wow. And
by the way, the judge...
Yes.
This is in 1951. The judge, by the way, is a guy named Obetz, and he's a big, huge Lyndon Johnson supporter.
Fascinating.
They call
and
this
so then,
Bubba. They call this Bubba Justice. By the way.
Oh, I'll bet. So this is how Lyndon Johnson was able to get where he wanted, because he has even his hitmen covered. They can do things with impunity.
Absolutely. Now, Malcolm Wallace's fingerprint was found on a cardboard box on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Building, where we're told Lee Harvey Oswald did the shooting from. But here's something else. Not only is his fingerprint there, but 6 people describe somebody who looks just like Wallace in one of those windows. Not someone who looks like Lee Harvey Oswald.
Oh, I see. So
one
in other words,
of those witnesses was a guy named Richard Carr, who described Wallace to a T. He tells the police department everything. And lo and behold, over the next several years, he has more than 4 attempted assassinations on his life.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Matter of fact, we will probably get in a little bit later of how many people were actually killed that might have been able to clear up, or at least bring to the table some more evidence about who shot JFK. But it seemed to be a lot of folks were dropping like flies after this.
Yes. Yeah, quite a few. Quite a few.
And the whole idea of Mac Wallace doing LBJ's dirty work, does that extend to also his LBJ's sister being bumped off as well?
Yes, I believe she died of carbon monoxide poisoning, but that's how Malcolm Wallace killed several people. And here's something interesting too. Malcolm Wallace himself is killed in a freak single accident car crash in his home state of Texas in 1971. He's driving home, and he drives his pickup truck right off the road, and he's dead. Now, he was a very heavy drinker his entire adult life, and he often drove drunk. However, lo and behold, it looks like somebody rigged his pickup truck so that the carbon monoxide goes right into the truck cabin.
Oh, interesting.
So that's how he went out, yeah.
Kind of kind of payback there, it sounds like to me.
It sounds like payback to me. And